This is St. Pete X, affectionately known as SPX. SPX brings you St. Pete's brightest business people, civic leaders, and citizens who share their insight and expertise as well as their love of our great city. SPX is presented by the St. Petersburg Group. Head to stpete.co to check out more episodes, and by St. Pete's most effective marketing agency, Big C. Browse to bigc.co to see their work. Now enjoy the conversation.
Hi, this is Ashley, and I'm here with Joe.
Hello.
The male voice of the show, as he's been called. And we are happy to welcome Amy Rettig. Amy is the Senior VP of Community Engagements at Nielsen. And you'll tell our audience a little bit about Nielsen, but it's a household name.
It is. We like to think that. Yes, Ashley, we do. It's 95 years old as we celebrate that birthday this year.
Congratulations.
95 years. Started in 1923. But a really exciting birthday for us in West Central Florida is that we've spent 50 years in the state of Florida, starting out in Sarasota in 1968, moving to Pinellas County in 1972. So 50 in Florida. And we just today met for the big banners that are going outside on the front of our building up in Oldsmar.
And maybe debunk some perceptions about Nielsen. I mean, I think, some may assume it's sort of Big Brother in some selected houses that used to track and record some of our behavior. Is that no longer accurate, or was that ever accurate?
It was not really ever accurate, but I like to talk about how we do what we do. And somebody might ask me 24 years ago when I started, gosh, why did you take off my favorite television show? And I like to say, we didn't, but somebody did. And those somebodies happen to be clients of ours. And they might be a network, a television network, an ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, that would have been a big client 24 years ago and still continue to be a client today. And if not enough eyeballs are tuned in, which is what we measure, how many households are tuning in and who's watching what, then of course that show may not live to see the next season, right? And I'll never forget, I have a lot of brothers and they always said, you're working for that company that took off Freaky Links or something that might have been a favorite for one season and was no longer around, which meant that advertising dollars were not necessarily being wisely spent in the eyes of the advertiser, which is why we're in business. We are the advertising currency for buying and selling that advertising time. So big thing to point out, especially after a 2018 Super Bowl where you saw advertising content right at about $5 million per ad. So it is important to us to be able to identify who's watching what. And we do that with meters that are installed in people's homes. And we have hundreds of those meters right here in the Tampa Bay area. And that number continues to grow with how we can identify who's watching what. But the meters only identify the content that you are consuming. And today, that's really what it's all about, content. It's not necessarily television programming, because my 15-year-old is certainly not watching TV like you or I did when we may have been consuming that content back in the day. It really was just changing the channel, right? I date myself when I do my in-the-air knob change, don't I, Joe? I'm not. Yeah. It's kind of old school.
You are turning a fake knob right now.
Right. And maybe I should just use at least a fake remote.
Just put your two fingers on your temple and change it with your mind,
That would be more accurate today than how it has been for the many years that we've been identifying who's watching what. So we've been doing that in our business since 1950. And so it's evolved. And for 60 years, we've been using paper diaries. But in the year 2018, we will finally be retiring that favorite
really? So
diary.
Still using? In
smaller markets, smaller and mid-sized markets across the United States. Actually, there's 140 of our 210, what we call designated market areas that had still been and still continue through the month of May.
Right.
Will continue to use diaries. And then after that, the retirement party will begin, and appropriately so, since it's 50 years and the diary is one of the many reasons why we came to Florida.
Sure. How do they submit those diaries?
A person would be selected. Typically, it's by their address on where they live. In the case of diaries, though, over the years, it could be your telephone number. And so that has evolved, certainly. But today, it is address-based sampling, and we are getting a variety of households to participate, but certainly those response rates have continually gone down, right? And more people would want us to be able to identify what's being viewed by audio encoding. And that's how we today currently are identifying much of what content is being consumed by us, the consumers.
So it seems like that data should be relatively available through the cable boxes. It seems like something they could build in there, and they haven't done that, or
they have return path capabilities and set-top box data might be what our friends at Spectrum would be able to provide, or Charter, or some of the large providers across the United States. We actually partner with quite a few of them to provide us with what is being consumed. But I use my own home here in St. Pete as an example. I have 6 television sets. I should say we, in my household, right? They're not just all mine, but I probably consume more of the content than anybody else. But on the 6 sets, there's only one that's hooked up to my Spectrum, formerly Bright House cable set-top box, right? So of the 5 other TV sets, return path data capabilities are only coming from that main set in my living room. And I happen to watch a lot of TV, sadly or not, unfortunately, in the kitchen, right?
6 seems extreme.
Does it? Yeah. Well, 2 are in the garage that don't get consumed. But you're right. I would say none are in bedrooms either. It's just we have a lot of ways to consume that content on traditional TV platforms, and that's not counting iPads, cell phones, right? But the return path capability in my house may be different than either one of you, but I only have one set that the cable company knows what content was being provided to watch, right? So if I was tuned into a cable provider, ESPN or the Hallmark Channel or something like that on the main TV in my home, it would know that, right? That return path capability is there. But none of the other sets have that in my particular household, since I don't have any other cable set-top boxes. So it's not getting the entire picture, if you will, of the consumption that's going on in the home. So that's why the evolution of all this has had to change. And we went from that old school, what I've already stated, channel change approach. What channel was on the TV set at a particular time, to moving to what content was being consumed at a particular time, what was on a particular channel. And whether you watch it online or you watch it on traditional linear television, we have the capability of identifying that because of audio encoding. And there's audio codes and signatures, and now today we call watermarks, that allow us to uniquely identify even content that might be aired on all channels, a State of the Union or something like that, that we can identify where you watched it, Joe, versus where Ashley watched it.
Interesting.
And then Nielsen has the data to understand a bit of what your profile would be in terms of the consumer.
Demographic.
Yeah.
Yes. And not to cut you off, because I think that's where you were going with who the consumer is. And really, that's kind of where we come into play, because our company that started in 1923 is family-owned and operated. From 1923 until 1984, the Nielsen family, Mr. Nielsen Sr., A.C. Nielsen Sr. and his son, who took over, that company was family-owned and operated. It was really the kind of the holy grail of, did advertising lead to a purchase? So our company is really 2 big segments, and we've only talked about one, which is the watch and listen segment. We have radio measurement as well, but we also have a buy segment, which tells me how much Kavita is being purchased versus how much Nestle Pure Life water. I'm seeing some interesting beverages here. Hint, watermelon, water-infused, 0-calorie
We're advanced beverage consumers here.
I'm intrigued.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Joe's is somewhat nondescript. Mine is a probiotic-infused, culturally adept drink. And Amy's got some pure water.
Plain old water
Right.
over here. But that's a big piece of what Nielsen can provide to a client like the one I have in my hand, which happens to be Nestle. They own Zephyr Hills water. So here in the Tampa Bay area, we would be able to provide who's buying Zephyr Hills water versus who's buying their other brand, which happens to be the Pure Life brand, owned by the same company. And Nestle's been a big client for many, many years for Nielsen. So it's consumer information, who's buying what, who's consuming what content-wise, and who's listening to what. Since 2013, we acquired Arbitron, who had been kind of the longtime radio research company out of Maryland. And we were competing with them for many, many years. And in 2013, we acquired them. And now we have our Nielsen audio brand, which tells us who's listening to what on radio.
And moving into streaming with that? Are you moving into,
Yes.
And even, you're doing some measurement around podcasting too, right?
We do. And we have capability there with, I was just talking to the 15-year-old crowd. My daughter goes to St. Pete High, right? So I try to stay up to speed on at least music, right? Love music, love live music, and just was at Janice Landing on Friday night with some live music consumption, right? That's not what we're measuring there, but we are measuring how many units sold. So in 2017, Ed Sheeran would have been, the kind of high volume guy. And you see somebody like Ed Sheeran or Kendrick Lamar or Taylor Swift coming up at the top of the charts for total consumption and albums. Interestingly enough, we're talking probably those vinyl records that you would have thought have gone along the wayside have become very, very popular again.
Yeah.
So
That's the trick with all the shows that got canceled after one season. They wouldn't be called classics right now if they hadn't gotten canceled after one season. If they had ran on 3 or 4, run out of ideas, they would have just been lost to history. So those people should appreciate that Nielsen caused them to be canceled. No, I'm kidding.
that's what I'm here to debunk, right?
Yes,
Using
yes,
your words. But no, if there was enough, there was 100 episodes to put into kind of that Monday through Friday strip, we could all see it in syndication so it could live on.
Right.
But you think about the 1950s when we first started to measure television, the number one show for 4 years, which was only on a very short time, was I Love Lucy's show. It's kind of that iconic show. But there was enough episodes to live on so that our children can maybe enjoy some of the same humor that we might have, or our parents.
You mentioned the Hallmark Channel. I would pay for a service that I think they only have about 6 movies that they show over and over. And I would pay for a service that would ping me when my mother's watched one of those movies over 5 times, and I could just go to her house and make sure she gets out and see some daylight.
Joe, your mom and I might have something in common there. Sadly, that may be the case. Not that I play favorites, but I, especially around the holidays, tend to tune in.
That's where they get you, right? The holidays with some of the
that's their Super Bowl.
The love stories like Candace
Saturday
Cameron.
Night Live.
Candace Cameron.
That's the Hallmark Super Bowl.
It's the Hallmark Super Bowl. It's the one time a year when
Are the ads going for $5 million a minute?
not quite as high as that, but I could probably find that out through one of our mechanisms internally. So
They did it right though. I mean, for being a niche channel, they have some devotion to them.
they do.
So tell me a little more about how deep you get into the statistics. When do you have employees or people that are regularly at the brands, offices, engaging with them on their media buying and the direction they go? And can you take that data? How much can you A/B test? Would they put out different ads and through different platforms and whatnot? And then how far down that road do you go with them?
Well, the answer to that is, in a lot of ways, we have my colleagues that sit on site at a big client like Walmart. We just re-signed Walmart this year and Sam's Club, so it's very exciting for Nielsen. And there are colleagues that live right there by the client within their entity in Bentonville, Arkansas. And we have client sites that our colleagues are sitting in across the United States and across the globe. So Nielsen operates today in over 106 countries. And having been there for the couple of decades that I have, it's been fun to watch how we've increased that number and certainly how it's different, right? How we do things differently across in emerging markets versus how we do them here in the United States. Initially, we saw a lot from our Canadian friends and colleagues, how things were changed. In fact, they retired the diary a long time ago in Canada versus us having the diary for 60 years here in the United States. But it has to be what the market is looking for. And in this market, meaning the United States here domestically, the diary continued to live on because it was affordable and it was still a great way to identify who was watching what in smaller markets. Having come to Florida 37 years ago from what would be considered a smaller market, Harrisburg, Lancaster, Lebanon, York, Pennsylvania, it was actually a top 50 market that never chose to move in a different direction from the diary. So for 60 years, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania has been using a diary and will change as of this May. So that evolution has been exciting to see. So to go back to your question on, being on site, we have a lot of that. We have not just on the buy side, which I've started to mention, the buy side of Nielsen, who's purchasing what, with the big clients, as mentioned, Nestle, Coca-Cola would be in that, as well as Procter & Gamble. So Nielsen has a big presence in Cincinnati, right across the street from P&G. So one of, if not the big top 5 clients for all of Nielsen, because they're a big advertiser. And mentioning again what Mr. Nielsen always had in mind, which was to identify that holy grail. You want to know how much Tide detergent was being
Yeah.
purchased, we could then take some of that data and identify, well, here's where the ad content was going out there. Certainly it's evolved. We've done a lot of changing over these years, many, many years. And what started out as Mr. Nielsen being in the business of engineering performance surveys to identifying how many Campbell's soup cans were coming off the line to identifying then when there was radio advertising and then eventually in 1950 with television advertising, signing those clients on and all of the, starting with New York and Chicago, Los Angeles, and moving forward with signing these clients over the years and growing our business. The media side of Nielsen was not a huge moneymaker for almost 18 years. And the consumer measurement, what we used to call marketing research side of Nielsen, was kind of keeping us afloat. We did make a great decision to move the production of the media measurement business to Florida, and that's what happened 50 years ago. And the diary was certainly that tool, as mentioned, and this was a great place to mail the diary from and to have it returned back to us. We could also have a population of employees that wanted to work for us on a cyclical basis that were interested in editing the data that came in and calling people to see if they'd be willing to participate. And you asked about colleagues that are, focused on statistics. It was fascinating to me. I had never taken, even in college, never took a statistics class until I joined Nielsen. And probably 1996, 97, I took my first real statistics class up in Schaumburg, Illinois, right where Nielsen has its roots in the Chicago area. And I took that class alongside my colleagues that were considered statistical research experts and methodological research experts. Today, we call them data scientists. So in the building that I happen to work out of, which is called our Global Technology and Innovation Center, many of my colleagues are truly scientists. And our tagline today, the science behind what's next, is, I think, daily something that I can view, having been earlier today, just with an electrical engineer in an audio lab, talking about the testing that goes on within Nielsen homes and how we are trying to identify when somebody might be in a apartment complex in Brooklyn where there might be a TV on in one room and a radio on in another, and how all that content can be still identified, right? So we do a lot of that testing in our facility right here in Pinellas County, up in the Oldsmar area. And that building that we built 14 years ago houses those engineers, the data scientists, and of course, the information technology professionals that are identifying new ways to assist our clients' efforts. And probably over the years, some of the more innovative things have been to take a brand, whether it be the new Coke, and identify how that might, trend, how it might sell, what might be the chance for that product, that new product to live. So there's different facets of this business that have certainly kept me engaged in what I do for the last 24 years. It's absolutely fascinating.
So understanding the, what you're able to offer P&G in terms of insights around their advertising, are you also able to aggregate all of your collective data about said product and to go to R&D and go to, to product and say, fortunately or unfortunately, all natural products or products that have, have low sodium, high protein. I'm just talking about, let's say we're talking about soup. Those are, from a category perspective, are actually outperforming those options that don't meet that criteria and actually inform the organization at various touch points in product creation, in display, and even the qualities of their products that they're talking about in their advertising.
So you've mentioned all of that life cycle. We want to be the partner with the client when it comes to making those decisions based on even the placement of the product on the shelf. And today in my colleagues' buy engineering area, so we have a full store set up. We happened to make a big purchase, great purchase at the local Oldsmar Walmart, where I think many people were wondering what kind of party we were going to throw with all the various products we were purchasing, but made the purchase so that we could display on the shelves all the different varieties that might be out there that might be just a little bit different. One product might look a little bit like the other, but yet there's some facet there that's a little bit different. So we're using that store today to identify with the cell phones that all of us have, ways that we can identify things about that product just by using the barcode. But today we're using it for training purposes for our in-store personnel. And as mentioned earlier, in emerging markets, there are different ways that we have kind of in our back pocket that we can use to identify who's buying what. And sometimes it's in much smaller areas, much more less populated areas of the world. We may still have to go in and use the old paper and pen methodology. We've even gone in and had a separate garbage can for products that were being thrown away just to be able to understand more about the consumption of products. So we go to great lengths, no matter where we are, whether, again, domestically or internationally, how we can identify who's buying what and to partner with those clients to identify and understand more about the consumer. And whether or not this Kavita, sparkling probiotic.
I went to soup from Kavita. I probably should have stayed on our example. But if I'm Kavita and you're giving me feedback on my advertising, but then, you say, items that have probiotics and that are fermented are actually being eclipsed by drinks that are offering, that have carbonation to them, that have protein infused in them or whatever it may be, and you're informing my business at a different level.
So, it's been interesting to see what has grown tremendously. So some of the things that I might get into from the buy side of our business, which is, again, Florida has been mostly media focused, but I love to learn from these colleagues that have been exposed to the variety of FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods companies and what they're learning and what Nielsen can help to provide them. But using kind of that example where the packaging, we have a facet of Nielsen. We acquired a company called Brand Bank, which identifies every single one of the products with taking a picture of them. And obviously with technology the way it is today, being able to move forward with not having to have in-store counts and looking at the end caps. And if you are a client like Publix, a lot of that data you collect on your own, but there's other ways that we can help. But if you're also, your own brand, right? You mentioned that earlier. At least I thought you were going in that direction with the store brands that have increased in popularity, and certainly those products that might have less salt, low sodium, all of the ways that we can see. And I will tell you that it's been incredible to see the increase in some of those organic brands and some of the, I would say, liquid drinks, the caffeinated coffee. Obviously, I drink coffee, through liquid form anyway, but having it already made, the pre-made coffees, have you noticed that that's taking more shelf space than what it once did?
Cold brews.
So pre-made
nitro.
Yeah, the nitro and teas. So both coffees and teas have exploded in the last year, where you see the shelf space with products like both of you have that are taking over from our kind of old standard true sodas. And I just watch it in my daughter and her friends that they're just not drinking that.
So you have those insights that are based on purchase and consumption behavior, but some of your insights that are broader in their assumptions. I read one about Americans' commitment to restrict sugar, right, in their daily diets, and how maybe a quarter, a little bit north of that, that's important to them. So are you doing focus groups outside of, your typical what we watch, what we listen to, what we buy, that are culling more meta data?
Yeah, and it's something that I've been very proud of to be a part of, a very small part of, because I do work within the diversity and inclusion arena for Nielsen today. And just to see insights on who's buying what, whether it's an African-American consumer, an Asian consumer, the LGBTQ consumer. Wow, that has exploded in the past couple of years. I'm so proud of the company that I work for, because we've been realizing that what's important to us, and we've had an external advisory council for almost 12 years now, where these external advisors come in from other areas, other industries. Some are media, some are advertising, some are working in diversity and inclusion themselves. And they look at all of what we provide and say, this should really be a little bit different. Nielsen should increase minority supplier diversity. We should have more business with minority and women-owned business. And so that has been at the top of the list. Increasing our diverse workforce has been at the top of the list. But it of course revolves around what's the appropriate thing, going back to the client and the consumer measurement that we have been in for 95 years. So what we can provide has evolved, and it's changed, and it's exciting. And I've been very proud to watch that evolution, at least for the brief time. I don't know if you call brief 24 years, but in the time that I have. And as stated before, people still reference us here in Florida as Nielsen Media. And I'm here to say that we are one Nielsen, and that we do have what people watch, buy, and listen to as everything under that umbrella, including much more excitement.
Can you share with our audience some of your observations, if you take the past year, of what you are observing about what we're consuming or how we're watching, or something that we'd be surprised to learn?
Yeah, I mean, Netflix has been probably at the top of everybody's list to hear and learn a little bit more about. At the end of 2017, we were able to release some information related to when you compare something like Stranger Things 2 and the release of that and the binge watching that is going on across, I think, our globe, but specifically here in the United States. And when you stack up a Stranger Things 2 episode, it might hold its own against a Big Bang Theory, which is, you're seeing probably something that others might not necessarily agree with. Oh, I think people are watching less TV, but I think they're consuming more. And of course, the social content ratings are fascinating with, people commenting on the Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead or even last night's Bachelor, right? So those probably were at the top of the list for 2017, shows like This Is Us, where people are going on and commenting about what's on television. And but Netflix has probably been one of the bigger stories for us, being able to provide information to our clients related to what they're consuming, related to that binging. I mean, I remember the release was right around Halloween, and there were probably, 14 and 15-year-olds that got together at my friend's house to watch that Stranger Things, and all 8 episodes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get into product placement now, though? So if you think about Netflix and the aversion to...
Yeah. So we have a sports and entertainment division. In fact, we just had some of our colleagues in that were here for the NHL hockey all-star game in Tampa. And we love it when we can host big sporting events. And I guess we're getting ready for 2021 with the Super Bowl that will be able to be back in the Bay Area, which is very, very exciting. So my colleagues in sports and entertainment tell me that, when you think about the Eggo waffle in something like Stranger Things 2, and Stranger Things, I guess it was more evident in the first episodes than the second run. But that is exactly what we can count. And it is a big piece of what some of the acquisitions that we've made in 2016, 2017 have been allowing us to do, to be able to identify that. We made an acquisition of a company called Repucom that allows us to identify a lot of that, not just within what we just mentioned, Netflix and the brand, and showing us that product, but consumer consumption when you're watching a sporting event. And so many of us who are fans of our own hometown teams or beyond, you think about all the logos that you're seeing and all the companies that spend a lot of money to advertise within that realm. It's another piece of our pie.
At the center of the retail universe right now, kind of a big black hole gobbling everybody up, is Amazon. And I think they're pretty insular when it comes to their data. How is that disrupting things with your clients and with the space in general?
Well, I think they're coming up with their own content, right? And I think I heard today, just on that same note, Netflix, spending more for original content, right? $27 billion, I think, would it be? I think I heard that. We'll have to verify if that's.
We are accepting calls,
okay.
Amazon, for the podcast.
Yeah. And that was Netflix. Yeah, but Amazon, gosh, I think that they're everywhere. They're prevalent and so pervasive and involved in everything that we're all doing, right? Not just what Nielsen is involved with. I even talked with a colleague the other day who, we're moving some data to Amazon, the cloud offering from Amazon. So they're everywhere,
yeah.
Right? I personally couldn't tell you any content right now, but are you familiar with some of it?
The Amazon?
Yeah, with their content.
Yeah, House of Cards is the big one.
Well, that's Netflix.
Is it? Oh,
yeah, that one.
Sorry.
I'm not sure.
What is the big one?
I'm supposed to stay an unbiased outside third party, so
how did I miss that?
I don't want to say that I've been watching Stranger Things 2 when in fact maybe I haven't, or maybe I have. I don't know, but whatever subscription video on demand option or Hulu or any option that you have. I ended up buying Hulu for my parents and then not necessarily anybody ever using it, sadly enough. We consume some Netflix. I'm a traditional TV kind of gal. So again, I'm wearing my Nielsen hat, so I can't play any favorites, but it does change our business. And so you're exactly right with that, Joe. I mean, it's any way that you can get content, we want to be able to provide that viewership, really.
So Joe and I were sitting on a panel addressing entrepreneurs and small business owners, and there were questions about Amazon and Facebook and how Facebook got their information and how they understood, the data on the audiences that they served up. And when you think about, and Joe had a very, profound revelation about how it was a singular moment of profound insight that stands out to me. And in that, you talked about some of the technology that's now part of our daily life that's secretly, maybe not so secretly, getting information and listening into what we're doing, whether it's, Alexa or, some other assumptions. And I wonder, Joe, if you want to elaborate on that and just how that's affecting Nielsen and some of the technology changes from a hardware perspective.
Yeah, what happens, this is something that we've experimented with here at Big C, but I had a young gentleman in who just wanted some business life advice, whatever, and he asked me for some of my favorite book recommendations. And I mentioned one to him that's I haven't touched in 2-3 years. Haven't searched for it, haven't interacted with it in any way, simply just said it in the room to him sitting in the chair next to me. And the next time I got to my computer and went on Facebook, I was served up multiple ads for that book. Wow. So it actually heard the words through my phone because I have the Facebook app on my phone and was able to translate that into ads.
Well, I know my husband has kind of made he was not happy that Santa Claus brought Alexa to our house because he thinks that my
Alexa's tapped.
Yeah, that my 15-year-old's just going to be ordering, all kinds of vinyls, But instead, we're just going to go to Daddy Cool. We're just going to shop local here and make sure that we get our vinyls at home rather than ordering them off Alexa and Amazon. But yeah, I mean, we are definitely changing the way that we do what we do, more software capabilities than ever before to be able to identify content. And, I'm sitting here with my Fitbit watch on, and I think this obviously would be the most, obvious choice to move in the direction of wearables and cell phone. I'm looking at the phones here on the desk, but ways that we're not going to leave the house without our cell phone, right? Nielsen has a portable people meter today that identifies audio in-home consumption, out-of-home consumption. And it might not be that you would go back if you forgot that portable people meter that is identifying. I get up in the morning, it might not be the top of the list. We do have literally hundreds of thousands of participants across the globe that carry a portable people meter for us. But the wearable option and the cell phone option to be able to identify that content through the audio code or watermark is really the direction that we're going in. And I'm very proud of the engineering staff and IT colleagues that I work with because, when you talk about the number of patents that we have at Nielsen, we are definitely second to the University of South Florida in this area, but there's hundreds, over 500 patents right now that I like to kind of toot the horn of these colleagues that have worked on ways to identify audio content, for instance. And we have a demonstration room for clients and students at Nielsen, and there's 90 patents on the wall. And the vast majority of those 90 patents that are just displayed, they just happen to have 90, are all about, in the mid-90s, moving towards something that we called active-passive metering. And it was identifying an active code that was embedded in audio. And if it couldn't find that code or didn't identify it, then we would take kind of what we call a fingerprint of the audio or a signature, a unique identification. Not really a recording of it, but just enough to identify that content. And so moving in that direction in the mid-90s allowed us to kind of take that base, if you will, and move forward with audio content measurement. And so it's become, again, the backbone to what we do for identifying that consumption. And it's incredible how we've evolved.
And I should have asked this before because I know we mentioned Facebook with the most recent example of the technology that maybe listens. But what have you approached Facebook for?
We do already partner with Facebook. So they're a big piece of what we do to be able to identify demographic information. And so that was probably a deal that has been made, Certainly, it's 2018 now, right? Within
Hard to
this,
believe.
it's been a few years back. I'm going to say 6, 8 years, but 6 probably.
And does
Maybe
that
not quite
speak to demographics, but also maybe the interconnectedness to different platform consumption? So TV and then social commentary, then
Absolutely.
something else. And you're trying
Yeah.
to sort of bridge all those.
And again, that social content rating for us is, we used to kind of dabble in what we called buzz metrics, what was out there and people talking about. Now we've moved in this direction with this social content. And as mentioned, it may be that people are tweeting or they're certainly mentioning some of the content that they may have watched, but tying it together. And I think you used it very, very well with the interconnection among all of that. And it's kind of exciting to use the historical affirmation that Mr. Nielsen had always thought that this was kind of bringing it full circle, right? He had no idea that this was going to happen with all of it, but making sure that, you get an ad today that is specific to you because of what you've already either stated or a purchase that you've already made. And so those kinds of specific consumer advertising options are becoming, I think, common in our society.
So following along the Facebook thread, one of the kind of known effects of how Facebook makes available their demographic information and then the ads that tend to follow that tends to segment people by ideology a little more effectively in that if they believe something, they tend to self-select that content. And then obviously, something slightly more salacious is always intriguing. If you want to know something about a celebrity or a politician or anything, and they say, oh, here's a newly revealed email or whatever, the more salacious the headlines, the more the hook. And then that tends to, over time, move people to more extreme points of view about things because they're getting fed just the same flavor of content constantly, having it. And then they tend to also start to see, because of the Facebook algorithms, the same kind of content, even from their family and friends that they, the stuff they linger on, Facebook gives them more of that, which then sort of crashes the diversity of what they're seeing. And so, the end result is pretty tight silos that people end up in as a demographic based around, some collected group of ideology. Does that resonate with what you've seen in
Well, I'm probably the last person, Joe, that you want to ask about Facebook. Since I'm not officially on Facebook, I will say that my family is sort of on Facebook, right? My daughter, my husband, but I just vicariously live through them on the Facebook side of things. So I am an Instagrammer. Is that a word?
That is.
Instagrammer. And I absolutely have had some fun with Snapchat. I might not be the one that does everything perfectly. I recently was trying to send something directly to my niece that got put on my story for everybody to see, which was just a picture of a grilled cheese. And in Charlotte, North Carolina, where she happens to go to college. So, I haven't quite mastered a lot of these mechanisms of 2018. Maybe I'm giving away the fact that I'm almost a boomer. I am Gen X, but I definitely try to identify with the millennial thing. I just am not probably the best person to ask about it. But I obviously have made my own thoughts clear when I see, a conservative brother of mine who happens to have, all of that being fed directly. I've seen it.
Right.
And certainly I think it goes back to how today is so intriguing and interesting, exciting in this world of data analytics and how Nielsen can continue to play a role even as we evolve with all the tools that are at our fingertips. And I think, Ashley, you said you have a 5-year-old?
I do. Almost 5.
So almost 5. I can't even imagine that your 5-year-old has gone without life without that iPad to keep them busy, right?
Right.
And the consumption of content in that way has just been a part of their life.
Absolutely. You know what I like though, and Joe, I appreciated your question about, the audiences and sort of how they're, what's the word I'm looking for? Not influence, but sort of their receptivity and how that influences their engagement or their perceptions. And what I really appreciate about your appeal to different audiences is you've moved beyond, qualifying millennials and boomers, and you've moved into a social sphere in terms of really understanding, getting into diversity and getting into sort of the psychodynamics of different audiences beyond the demographics, right?
Yeah, I not to cut you off there. I mean, we started employee resource groups at Nielsen over a decade ago. We happened to start with our Hispanic employee resource group, but we've now included our NGen group to bridge the gap between all of the generations. And amongst that would be any individual that wants to get involved in our business that way, but also to learn from the diversity of thought brought in from any group. Anybody can join any group. Today, we just had a huge event where we had a fundraiser for a local organization that happens to be near and dear to me right here in Pinellas County. AMI Kids started with their headquarters in Tampa, so very, very relevant in the local community with 7 states now that AMI Kids happens to have a presence in. But we had probably 12 AMI Kids, maybe even more, serving up Chick-fil-A while we were doing a fundraiser through our African American Employee Resource Group. And it was such fun to watch all of the activity going on our campus, if you will, that was kind of stemmed from the diversity of our colleagues, of my colleagues. We went from that fundraiser at lunch to when I left, they were doing the completion of our Winter Olympic Games that we had going on over 18 different countries participating, and everybody has a little beanie that has the Nielsen logo and the colors of the country that they're representing. And boy, oh boy, they I think they were doing ice dancing or something along those lines today, which is a heck of a lot of fun. So making the employee environment engaging for any age, right, to come to work, whether you have a flexible job or not in this day and age. You know, we struggle a little bit with making sure that if 61% of our millennial workforce is engaged, is first and foremost, that's what we're at. That number continues to rise. So we want to make it a great place to work, right? And I think it really has been for me personally, but I want it to be for all of my colleagues as well. So not only do we have, I like to bring this up, I think it's the 3 Ps. I think it's obviously the people, first and foremost. To me, that is especially the most important thing. But the products, and today our products couldn't be more interesting, especially because of the acquisitions that we've made. A recent acquisition I got to visit out in Emeryville, California, was a company that's now a Nielsen company called Gracenote. So all the metadata that we see in our cars and our vehicles telling us a little bit about the songs that we're listening to. And when I'm recording a program, if I'm going to record This Is Us on NBC, it tells me what episode it is. And all of that data is now Nielsen. And so that acquisition, which was a brilliant move to acquire Gracenote, has just been exciting to see how Nielsen has moved in that direction with those evolutions. But the work environment
What's the
has
final
been
P?
fun. Place. And I couldn't be happier that we have our largest facility in the world right here in Tampa Bay. Not only do we have about 2,450 people coming to work in Oldsmar, Florida, we hope they're coming into that office rather than working from home. Although there's some flexibility and people certainly have that privilege. But living and working out of this area has just been, again, 50 years in the making. And this has been the right spot to do business for Nielsen. Even though it's evolved over those 50 years, we've continued to grow. And it, quite frankly, is not only the largest number of employees, but the largest in square footage. So like I mentioned, we love to invite people out. We open up our facility all the time to community groups to use it for nonprofits if they're trying to raise funds. And we probably do that 60 times a year. We raised at the facility over $100,000 for local charity Oldsmar Cares just 2 weeks ago. And last year, if you combine 2016 and 2017, we had over 2,200 students come through the door. And that to me is a very fulfilling part of my job, to be able to work with students no matter what age, and kind of, again, goes back to the future and why we're proud to be part of Tampa Bay.
Wonderful.
So we do not resort to kitschy, is that what you use? Kitschy games or anything like that on SPX. But this feels like sweet, sweet revenge, Amy, because I had the opportunity to meet Amy. She addressed our leadership St. P class at our opening retreat early in 2017. And part of that was a fun game of trivia where you bestowed some lovely alcoholic beverages, not opened to the class, which was great.
I think they were St. Pete products, right?
Were they?
Yeah.
I don't know if I remember
that. Yeah. And
All
3
I know
daughters.
is it was
yes.
like cutthroat. I was trying to win. I did not. But the trivia was cool. And I wanted to do a quick contest with Joe and Amy to see who knows what. And I think what's on the line, it could either be Hallmark related or what's the prize?
I think Joe's got his hint watermelon water over there. I don't know.
I think if I win, Nielsen should guarantee us 1 million listeners. And
If Amy wins.
if Amy wins, then she can also guarantee us 1 million listeners for just her episode as opposed to every episode.
It was great, and I was surprised at how much my classmates knew. Obviously, they're big TV consumers, and this is not this. I pulled a few things from Nielsen. So, and note the recording date, we're early March. So this is actually my first question is a Valentine's question. So what was the top selling bakery item on Valentine's Day? You each get a chance.
Bakery item.
On Valentine's Day.
Cupcake.
And what's your choice?
Well, you have to say yes or no, then I'll know.
It was not cupcakes. Cupcakes was number 4.
Number 4.
This is all coming from Nielsen.
Bakery item.
Did you shop on Valentine's Day for a loved
I
one?
bought so many bakery items. I don't know which one.
Well, I think most people buy chocolate.
Think about it. Think about Valentine's
I'm giving
Day
you that, Joe.
and what's up for grabs.
I'm going to say glazed donut.
That actually, donuts was actually under cupcakes. So Amy, you took that one.
Not by a landslide, though.
romantic
I
glazed donut.
apologize to
Nielsen,
Joe's
I don't know.
wife.
I'm
I apologize
questioning your
to
methodology
Joe's wife
here.
as he consumed the treats for you.
Chocolate brownie or something?
Dipped and covered treats was the number one
How's that a
consumed
bakery
purchase.
item?
And message cookies. Personalized message cookies.
Yeah.
Okay, this next question is audio related. This is streaming, music streaming related to Justin Timberlake. I'm going to give you 3 JT songs. You're going to tell me the one that has the most downloads. Was it Justin Timberlake's Mirrors? Was it his song Sexy Back? Or was it his song Can't Stop the Feeling?
Lifetime?
Yes.
Well, my favorite is Mirrors, so I'm going to vote for it just because it's my favorite.
And I'm going to say Can't Stop the Feeling.
Can't Stop the Feeling was number 1 in terms of audio downloads.
I have a deeper taste than the general public.
Mirrors was down there, actually. Mirrors was 3rd. Then I think they did a lot of JT research and sharing with Nielsen audiences right around the Super Bowl when JT took stage and unleashed his new album. Okay, the primary reason why somebody goes to a physical auto dealership. I'll give you 3 options. Is it price value? Is it financing? Or is it car selection?
Price value, I'm going to say probably financing.
Okay.
Say car selection.
Car selection was the number 1 reason that people go to a auto dealership, according to Nielsen.
By the way,
Good job, Amy.
I'm just going to give you an
killing
insight.
us.
When I went to podcaster school, they said, always make your guests look good.
Thank you, because I had not seen any of those.
Okay, this is the last one. This one is, what do you call it when it's all or nothing?
Winner take all.
Winner take all.
Or sometimes it's
Final
called all or
Jeopardy.
nothing.
I don't know if I feel good about that because Amy is
she's
winning.
yeah.
This is actually not multiple choice. Nielsen shared this data actually, I think today. So what percentage of U.S. shoppers bought groceries online in 2016? Nielsen's making a big push.
2016 is a while ago, wasn't it?
Yeah,
That
it
wasn't
was.
hot
And
then.
they're making a big push right now and bringing the analytics to the surface in terms of how much of us no longer want to shop and leave our homes and do any of the work.
23%.
We can do it's Price is Right style. You can go one up or one down.
I think in 2016, online shopping
For groceries.
was, for groceries.
Yeah.
People were buying off Amazon.
Yeah, I
guess.
think that's a pretty good guess, Joe.
I think it was a really good guess.
Yeah. Me and you, maybe
Just
we're
do
on the same page.
23.1.
Yeah.
Did you say 23?
I
He
said
did.
23.
He
Amy,
said
what's your
23.
number?
I was going to
Right around that?
Right around that because 24% is sounding really good right now.
Yeah, the answer is 23%. I mean,
Joe, he wins right on the money.
poor musical taste, doesn't know anything about romance, yet he can figure out how many online
To the
shoppers
exact
to the exact number.
That's
This should be a
impressive.
moment of
That is my
pride for you. Is that how you bought your Valentine's Day?
I'm impressed.
I am too.
Yeah.
And really just
Well, Amy,
She did. Amy,
stayed
nice
there with me,
work.
so she felt it too.
I will say, if you're not following Nielsen and that at all appealed to you, you need to do it because I think I learned a lot about great musical artists and a lot of the stuff that happened around the Super Bowl most recently, but also, like I mentioned earlier, just how our consumption behaviors and how we're
It's
completely
fascinating.
yeah.
and they,
really
and they have a
is.
podcast as well. It's called Data, I believe, or
I
something
did
like
see
that.
that. I did
I
see
listened to an
that.
episode. It's cool.
Yeah. Sorry, no
Impressive.
alcohol to bestow, but
Yeah, they didn't have to resort to cheap tricks like
yeah.
trivia questions. But
Yeah. I won't do that again, but that was fun.
That was fun.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you all.
Yeah.
I'm happy that you gave me the invitation.
You're not off the hook
Not
yet, though.
Okay,
We have
all
one
right.
more. Well, first, I want to say I'm impressed by your command of the numbers. I know that's kind of part of your job, but I mean, if you ask me how old my kids are, I have to kind of look up and to the right for about 30 seconds. But just the way you throw out the years and the stats, and I'm assuming they're all accurate. You weren't just making them bad. Then that was impressive.
I hope so.
But we end every show with a shout out. So you've been in the community for a long time, as you mentioned. And so the shout out is for a person or organization that is sort of under the radar that could use a little more attention for the good work they do, that you just want to give them that.
Goodness gracious, to just say one would be difficult. I think I already said one that I think is a little bit of a hidden gem in our community for maybe troubled youth, kids who may have made a wrong decision. And that was my friends at AMI Kids Pinellas specifically. We just got a new building in Pinellas Park, moving from Paso Grill and just selling that site and moving to the center of the county to hopefully serve more kids. The executive director there, Robert Johnson, he and his wife are from St. Petersburg, Florida, natives. And I think they are truly examples of individuals that others would want to emulate from St. Petersburg. They give their hearts and souls to youth. Their story is really incredible. And the fact that Robert runs that organization and certainly it's one that's in need to continue to get some of the goodwill that's out there across Tampa Bay. But near and dear, I would say that one is something that has really been here in Pinellas County for 45 years. And not many people necessarily know about the fact that they are really doing some good in our community. So I guess that would be my one. Since I already gave them a plug, I'll continue to say that was a hidden gem.
I don't know if you happen to know the former development officer, Shannon Jager, who worked there. Shannon was the development officer at the Y prior to coming over to AMI, and a dear friend to our community, and passed away recently, but a lovely, lovely...
And a graduate of local schools, yes. I understand. And it goes back to these wonderful people that we have, and in this case had, but made a difference in other people's lives. And, I've had the great fortune of working with some wonderful groups. Just yesterday at the Pinellas Education Foundation, obviously, much of what we do in the community focuses on education. And so any ways that we can give back to our students, kind of already gave a plug for the fact that we love it when we bring students in, and we will continue to do that. That's what our job is. And I think all of us collectively, whether we have kids or not, whether we can mentor a youth here in our community, that is what the calling is all about. So if I could state that, maybe I've overstepped my boundary, 2 plugs, but anything you can do for a student, I think would be well deserved. And the enrichment there is wonderful. I am a lunch pal once a week with a 5th grader at Oldsmar Elementary. And it's probably the highlight of my week to hang out with some 5th graders and just be a sounding board for anything that those young ladies want to talk about at Oldsmar Elementary. So I think teachers and educators don't get certainly nearly the reward that they deserve. So that would be my final call out, I think, here in Pinellas. And Dr. Michael Grego has just done a phenomenal job as our superintendent.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you both. It's a pleasure.
You made it to the end of another great episode. For show notes, head to stpete.co to the show notes page, which includes links to all the resources mentioned in the show, as well as quotes and key insights from the show and information about the guest and the host. Thanks again to our sponsor, Big C. Head to Big C, that's BIGSEA.co to check out their work. And if you like what you heard, make sure to share this episode on social media and leave a comment.